Well, we got a minute. I'm gonna buy that truck I've been wanting.
Wait, don't you need, like, weeks to shop for a car?
I don't. Carvana makes it super convenient to find exactly what I want.
Hold up. You're buying a car on your phone? Isn't that more of a laptop thing?
You can shop wherever you want.
I like to do my research, read reviews, compare models. Plus, Carvana has thousands of options. How'd you decide on that truck?
Because I like it.
Oh, that is a great reason.
Go to Carvana.com to sell your car the convenient way.
Okay, you can do this.
I know. Carvana makes it so convenient to sell your car. It's just hard to let go. My car and I have been through so much together.
But look, you already have a great offer from Carvana. That was fast.
Well, I know my license plate and VIN by heart, and those questions were easy.
You're almost there. Now to just accept the offer and schedule a pickup or drop-off.
How'd you do it? How are you so strong in letting go of your car?
Well, I already made up my mind, and Carvana's so easy.
Yeah, true. And sold.
Go to Carvana.com to sell your car the convenient way.
We all belong outside. We're drawn to nature, whether it's the recorded sounds of the ocean we doze off to, or the succulents that adorn our homes. Nature makes all of our lives, well, better. Despite all this, we often go about our busy lives removed from it. But the outdoors is closer than we realize. With All Trails, you can discover trails nearby and explore confidently. With offline maps and on-trail navigation, download the free app today and make the most of your summer with All Trails.
It's time to get in the zone. Time to get in the zone with the 49ers Web Zone. This is the No Huddle Podcast with Al and Brian.
'49ers Web Zone No Huddle Podcast. We're part of the Odyssey Network. I'm Al Sacco with Brian Renick. We're kicking off the show today with a former Pro Bowler and three-time Super Bowl champion. He's the host of the Stinkin Truth podcast in the new show, Breakfast Ball on FS1. He's Mark Schlereth. Mark, thanks so much for the time, buddy.
Oh, it's my pleasure. It's good to be with you. How are you, buddy?
I'm doing great. You know, Mark, I was doing some research on you today because we've had you on a couple times, but we haven't really had a chance to talk to you about your career. And I had you up on Pro Football Reference, and I knew you were a Pro Bowler, and I knew you won Super Bowls. Mm-hmm. But one thing I saw that I thought was kind of amazing, you played in 15 playoff games. You won 12 of them. And I was like, I mean, I knew you had success, obviously, with Washington and the Broncos, but I just thought that was amazing. And obviously, you have great players that you played with, but you played for Joe Gibbs and you played for Mike Shanahan. Those are just two amazing coaches. Can you talk a little about the traits that they had and what you think made them both so successful as head coaches?
Yeah, there's several things that really made them successful. One, you know, there's, and I always say this, there's kind of two types of fear. There's the biblical sense of fear, which when they say in the Bible, like the fear of the Lord, that is like an awesome reverence or respect, right? Mm-hmm. And so Joe Gibbs and Mike Shanahan both had this awesome respect, reverence from the players, right? And you've got to have that to be able to lead men. So there's that aspect of biblical fear. There's also the aspect of fear. Like those guys would cut you if you didn't perform. It's just the way it is, right? There was a no-nonsense approach to the way they led their football teams. And if you did not produce and you did not do what you were asked, and if you were a receiver that wouldn't block, or you just don't get to play. And so there was that kind of just that kind of atmosphere within our organizations. And so that was, both types of fear were present in our organization. The other thing they did a phenomenal job of is really helping the player understand the whys, the kind of the W's, the who's, the what's, the whys. And so it wasn't just that we were going to run a play. We're going to run this play, and here's why we're going to run it. Here's how we're going to run it. And here's the ultimate benefit that will, and here's why it will benefit our football team. And if you're completely sold out to that, Kyle does a phenomenal job of this. I'm sure he's gotten it from his father. But if you're sold out to this, this is how we're going to benefit. This is how it's going to help us win a football game. I watched Kyle once in a meeting basically say, here's this play, and we're going to run this particular run 6 times. We're going to get 2 yards of carry. This play isn't worth a shit. But if we execute and we sell out on this play, Kittle, you're going to get an explosive. Ayuk, you're going to get an explosive. right? Use check, you're going to get an explosive. And we're going to end up at least scoring one touchdown and having 3 explosive plays. And so when you start talking about explosive plays in the NFL, and teams do it a little bit differently, but on average, it's a 10-yard run or a 20-yard pass. Well, each explosive on a drive equates to an average of 2.8 points per explosive. So all of a sudden, if you run a play 6 times and you get 2 yards of carry, but it nets you 4 explosive plays in the passing game, guess what? You're gonna win that football game. And so those coaches, Joe Gibbs and Mike Shanahan, has passed down, obviously, to Kyle Shanahan, were so phenomenal at essentially having us understand more globally why we do things and the benefit, the cause and effect of doing those things the right way. And so there's always that benefit. And you knew, man, if I sell out, we're gonna score. If I sell out, we're gonna do. This is what's gonna happen. This is the benefit. And I can tell you this. Anytime you win on Sunday, for a player, it's obviously it's always good to win. But losing, there's always some type of punishment involved in losing. Coaches are very great at at making you feel miserable, right? And so it was one of those things. Let's just avoid. Like we had a steadfast rule. It started with Joe Gibbs. I carried it over to Mike Shanahan. 2 things. Mondays, if we won, we didn't have to come in and watch film with coaches, right? So you didn't have to get your ass chewed by your coach. The grade sheets were there. You watched it on your own, and then we didn't have to meet as a football team. So there became this punishment aspect to going, Sunday you'd be in the fourth quarter, you'd be down and like, hey, sons of bitches, I do not want to sit down with those coaches tomorrow, right? I had to play in the third quarter. I don't want to hear about. So let's go. And then the other thing that we ended up doing with Mike is on Fridays. Now this is because, we did this with Mike Shanahan, but on Fridays, this wasn't a Joe Gibbs thing, but like, you don't want to put on a helmet and shoulder pads on Friday. So we had hat day on Fridays. And if you won, you got to go out on Fridays in a hat and you didn't have to put your helmet on, right? Hat and just jersey. And dude, like, we're simple creatures, just men in general, feed me well, and let me, we're pretty simple that way. Yeah. And it's amazing how just not having to wear your helmet out to practice on Friday, what a motivating factor that can be on a Sunday. And so little things like that, were this reward system. But like I said, it was really about how we're going to play together and what we're going to do to kind of create this opportunity for one another. And so, and that's the other thing. It's really about one another. Hey guys, if you sell out on this, and really sell the run on this, hey man, he's going to get a big time play and we're going to score a touchdown. And it's fun to see how all of us working together create, an opportunity for someone. So that's what I loved about those guys and how they were really similar.
My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/results to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
This season, Instacart has your back to school. As in, they've got your back to school lunch favorites like snack packs and fresh fruit. And they've got your back to school supplies like backpacks, binders, and pencils. And they've got your back when your kid casually tells you they have a huge school project due tomorrow. Let's face it, we were all that kid. So first, call your parents to say, I'm sorry. And then download the Instacart app to get delivery in as fast as 30 minutes all school year long. Get a $0 delivery fee for your first 3 orders while supplies last. Minimum $10 per order. Additional terms apply.
All-star closer Kenley Jansen, we have a question.
What's the best podcast of all time?
Baseball isn't boring, baby.
I'm Rob Bradford, and every single day I'm sitting down with the biggest names to show you this great game is the greatest game. It's my podcast. It's my passion. It's a cause I started more than 2 years ago and is now the most prolific national daily baseball pod there is. Another fact. So jump aboard the BIB Express. Follow and listen to Baseball Isn't Boring, presented by Wasabi Hot Cloud Storage on the free Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcasts.
Shifting to the Niners a little bit, the big story seems to be Brandon Ayuk, and Trent Williams is almost flying under the radar here. And Trent Williams may be the most important player of the 49ers when you look at how good he is and what he brings. I was listening to your show a few weeks ago when you were waxing poetic about how good he is and what he brings to the offense. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about, as a former offensive lineman, just what you see in Trent Williams?
Well, one, he's not afraid to lose. He is not afraid to, he never tiptoes off the ball. He never tries to position anybody. He never tries to make sure that he's safe. He comes off the ball and tries to shorten your freaking neck. And he is trying to kill people. It's frightening to watch. And it's also really exciting to watch. And so there's that aspect to him that sets a tone. It just for the offense, man, he's coming off hunting, and he's an intimidating factor out there. He is just something special. He's so fun to watch. And, he does fly under the radar because everybody makes the big deal out of the receiver, which is kind of ridiculous. But I think one of the reasons he probably flies under the radar is because Trent Williams is so damn good, he doesn't need to practice. This might be the best thing. What has he played? 14 years? Just having his body healthy. Trent, you just do whatever it is, a freak show from another planet does. And then you come in when we're ready to have you come in. I have no doubt in my mind that they'll come at the 11th hour. They'll go, here's your agreement. He signs it and he's in, and he's still the best left tackle in football without ever taking a snap in the preseason. So I just don't have a lot of fear about Trent Williams. Just hang tight, buddy. We'll get you when we need you. So I almost feel, and I haven't talked to anybody about this, but I almost feel like there's a wink, wink handshake deal with Trent. We'll be good. And so I almost feel like that's probably why there's not a lot of talk, because he is that important. I agree with you.
So I wanted to ask you this too. Do you think the missing training camp thing is a little bit overrated? Because remember, Bosa said last year, he signed, 3 days before the season. He said, you know what? It took me a little while to get in football shape. Trent's a different animal, but for somebody like Ayuk or another player, do you think that's really important for them to be here and get these reps?
I think as you age and you get to be a veteran, there's this kind of a scale of diminishing returns on practice. When you know what you're doing, you've done it, well for a long time. But as a younger player, you're always learning things. You're always getting that feel for the game. And let's face it, Ayuk has been 2 back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons, but his first season or two, there were some questions there. That wasn't as good as the last couple of seasons were. So, I think there is, to an aspect, a guy like Bosa or a guy like Ayuk, who you're required to be, more physically fit. I will tell you as an offensive lineman, once I block you or if I cut you or, once the ball goes outside, you as a defender have to chase it. That's your responsibility. I just walk to the next place we're going to huddle. I don't give a rip. We complete a ball 30 yards down the field. I just like this, wow, good one. And then I walk to the next huddle, so there's not as much cardiovascular fitness required to play O-line than there is, defensive end or wide receiver. So I think that the timing of that, the other thing that happens is the way we train today, in the off season, it's a problem because you don't train like football players. You train like track stars. And so there's there's this kinesthetic awareness of running a route and having somebody in phase, bumping on you and doing all that stuff. That stuff is real. And I think it's one of the reasons, in my opinion, and I don't know the statistical analysis on this, but I think it feels like there are far more soft tissue injuries, far more ACLs, Achilles during training camp than there ever has been. And I think it's because we don't train like football players. So all of a sudden you get out there and now you're playing football and you got somebody bumping into you. You know, there's a proprioception like skills, you know, and how to lean on people and nobody does that anymore. Like we used to beat the crap out of each other in the off season, right? I mean, we did one-on-ones. It was, hey, you know, we wear helmets out there without shoulder pads or anything. It was full speed, no pads. Let's go. And we did full speed one-on-ones, full speed reps all off season, and they've taken that out of the game. You know, and I think that leads to eventually more injuries because your body just isn't prepared to do that. And I think for both Ayuk and for a guy like Bosa last year, those reps are a little bit more important than they would be for Trent Williams.
Yeah, it's like you don't develop those calluses, right? You're just not football form to go. You know, the Niners, one thing that's been a concern this preseason so far is injuries. And they've played 60 games the last 3 seasons, and they've made it far to have, you know, really heart-wrenching losses. Now, you didn't have that problem in the Super Bowl. You won all your Super Bowls, but, you know, you did have some playoff losses along the way. How hard is that to come back from when you get that far, a divisional round or a championship or a Super Bowl, and say, oh, we made it this far and now we have to start over? Is there like a mental thing that you have to get over with that?
Yeah, I think anytime you lose in the playoffs, you know how close you are. And there's a sliding scale of disappointment. I'm sure losing in the Super Bowl is incredibly disappointing, right? Because you're the last two standing. Sometimes when you're beat up and you lose in a wild card, you're like, man, that sucks to lose, but God, I need to have this surgery. And there's kind of that light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak. But for the Niners, as deep as they've gone, and the disappointment to be in overtime and to lose that game to Kansas City, to be up 10 late in the game a couple of years ago, and to give up the one big long one to Tyreek, and to miss a couple things on offense. There's a couple throws that Jimmy Garoppolo didn't make that I think would have tilted the scales in San Francisco's favor, and they would have won that game. And then obviously to have the Brock Purdy injury in the NFC Championship, those things are so unfortunate. But I think one thing about the Niners, when you talk to guys, and I've talked to several guys this offseason, Kittle and Juszczyk, and like there is this unfinished business aspect to them that I really, really like. Yeah. Right? They know how close they've been. They know how good they are. They knew how good they can be. And there really feels like this, man, we've forget about disappointing our fans. That's tough, but we've really disappointed ourselves in the way at the end of the year, the way we haven't been able to finish. And so they feel like they're in a good place to me that way mentally. We'll see exactly how it plays out, but I know they're talented. I know they're tough. I know Kyle Shanahan does a great job with his staff and the rest of the coaches on that staff. Mm-hmm. So, I feel pretty good about kind of where they sit.
Stink, congrats on the new show. Thanks for the time. We always love having you.
Anytime, guys. Take care, man, and go Niners.
Thanks,
Thank
Mark.
you.
Yeah.
All right. Brian wasn't punished. If you were listening to that and you're wondering where the hell was Brian on that, Brian was just freezing because he couldn't. Stink couldn't hear him there. So Brian's back. Brian, we got to get into this preseason game a little bit here. Week 3 of the preseason, last preseason game. Oh, we know what? Before we talk about that, though, I just did a whole interview. I didn't talk about Brandon Ayuk's contract once. Did you notice that?
I did. I like
once. I alluded to it a little bit, talked about him coming into camp late, but we did not talk about the contract or the trade. I'm very proud of myself. I don't know if I'm going to get through the whole show without doing that, but here we are. Anyway, week 3 of the preseason. Looks like the starters are going to play, at least most of them.
Except for Brandon Ayuk.
And Trent Williams.
And
Christian McCaffrey.
Yes.
But my mind goes to the offense first. And the reason for that is what we saw in the last game. Not that I put a lot of stock into that at all, because I don't. But Purdy's going to be behind center again. Mm-hmm. You probably have some former Jordan Mason or Elijah Mitchell, maybe a running back. We'll see what happens. Yeah. I'm assuming Debo and Kittle will play at least a little bit.
Mm-hmm. And Jennings.
And Juwan Jennings, and then maybe a Chris Conley or whoever's going to end up being at Ayuk's spot. So he'll have his weapons out there. What I want to see in this game as well, the offensive line that we were knocking last week, right now is their starting offensive line.
Right.
Aaron Banks is hurt. Trent Williams isn't there. So if those guys are not back by week 1, the line you're going to see is Jalen Moore, Nick Sackel, probably. We'll see what happens with Burford.
Yeah.
Jake Brendel, Dominic Cooney, who they basically said has won the right guard competition, and Colton McKivitz. If they look the way that they did last game, I'm going to be a little bit nervous. I want to see the Niners come out here. Not, again, it's preseason. They're not going to show much, but just seem like they have a little continuity, a little swag on offense.
Yeah. And, like we said in our last episode, he was throwing to guys that, he isn't really ever going to be throwing to. And guys like Trent Taylor, who probably isn't going to make this team. And, let's not forget Purdy's game, right, is between the ears and his timing. And if you watched any of the film, which was gross, any clips, right there, the 49ers wide receivers, when Brock Purdy was on the field, were getting roughly 0 separation from the cornerbacks that were covering them. And again, Purdy thrives on timing routes, thrives on knowing where you're going to be so he can deliver the ball there. And when you don't have rapport with the guys that you're throwing to, you're not going to trust that, and it's not going to look good. And so he has rapport with Debo. He has rapport with Kittle. He has rapport with Jennings. Mm-hmm. If those guys are out there, I think we're going to see a little bit more of a comfort level from Brock Purdy. Again, not to say that, he can't succeed without the Avengers. What we're saying is he's a timing quarterback, and he thrives on timing routes. And when you're playing with guys that you're not used to playing with, that timing goes out the window and that confidence goes out the window. And I think that's part of what we saw. The other thing was they played a Saints team that was playing their starting defense and their starting defensive line. And that's a top 10 defense in the NFL, more than likely by the end of 2024. And they're good, right? Like, they're good. And when you have scrubs everywhere, except for along the offensive line, you've got most of your starters, it's just not going to look good. And so to have the regulars out there, I think is going to be huge for Purdy. And I think we're going to see a pretty different performance from him, not to mention the fact that they're not going against the level of defense that they did against the New Orleans Saints.
What's a little scary too? Ricky Pearsall didn't practice this week. We know how the Niners can be with injuries. I really hope he gets back there next week, because if he doesn't, again, now you're talking, is he going to start the season maybe on IR or something? We don't know, but let's hope he gets back next week. This IU thing we don't know about, and I put out a tweet joking. I don't know if people took it that way or not, because when you look at it, it's pretty frightening, and it really could happen. Niners week 1 wide receivers. There's a world where it's Debo, Conley, Jennings, Cowing, Taylor, and Bell, or some form of that. If Ayuk isn't ready or whatever's going on there, if Ricky Pearsall isn't healthy, that's a little bit scary. I do think Debo is going to have a big year this year. He understands he's probably playing for his 49ers career, or at least another contract somewhere else. Mm-hmm. I suspect him to have a big year. At least it looks that way right now. Kittle, if they target him, again, we'll have a gigantic season, and you have to head him into whatever kind of pass catchers, and McCaffrey too. But that receiving group looks really, really thin all of a sudden if you don't have Ayuk and you don't have a first-round pick there. So that's going to be really interesting to see how it all plays out. And look, they invested a lot in Pearsall. I mean, that's the guy that they were bringing in to replace one of their all-pro receivers. So they need to get him back on the field.
Well, and not only that, but this Ayuk contract situation plus the Ricky Pearsall injury really puts restrictions on the roster management as well, because – right, you're going to have to cut down to the 53 man. If you still haven't signed Ayuk, right, and Pearsall is still injured, then if with Pearsall, you're going to have to either put him on the PUP or put him on the IR, which takes him out weeks into the regular season. Otherwise, he takes up a roster spot, and you don't have anybody to come up behind him because he's taking up a 53 man spot. And then again, with Ayuk, it's like, if they don't have him signed, I mean, he is signed. He's under contract, right? I don't know what the roster ramifications are because he hasn't reported, right? Or he's sitting in. But what does that look like when he's under contract? Because again, we're not talking about a free agent that they're trying to to negotiate with. This is a player that is under contract for them that has to take up a 53-man spot. So again, if both of those guys are taking up a spot, Ronnie Bell and Trent Taylor don't even have a spot. Like they can't even be on the roster. So like this shit has to get figured out, and soon, because the rubber is about to meet the road when it comes to that 53-man. And both of those players, Ayuk and Pearsall, are really throwing a wrench in what they can do when it comes to constructing that roster.
Yeah, for sure. And defensively in this game, the secondary, I think, has looked great. I'm really excited about the secondary. If Hufanga's not ready, I'm confident enough that George Odom can kind of, be okay for a few weeks there and fill in if he needs to. Linebackers, there's some talent there behind Warner and Campbell. Again, I feel like there's more depth there than maybe I thought that there was. So what I want to see in this game, I want to see the defensive line. And I don't mean the 4 starters. I mean, the other guys on the defensive line start to give me a little bit of a hope that, this unit's a little bit deeper than I thought it was. Because right now, that's the offensive line is a concern for me. And on the defense side of the ball, the defensive line is a concern for me. And the defensive line is typically not, as in this regime with the 49ers. It's typically like, you know what? They put a lot of resources into here. This is what they build their team around. Right now, it is not for me. I'm definitely concerned. So I want to see Gross Matos, and Gibbons and guys like that kind of say, all right, okay, they're making me feel a little bit better. Somebody like Alex Barrett's had a really good camp, who's definitely on the roster bubble. But I want to see some of these guys that look like they can step up and when the big dogs got to come out of the game, they can still make plays.
Yeah, and again, our biggest concern going into this season, the run defense, and what does the interior of the defensive line look like? We've had injuries there. Kalia Davis is out for a while. I don't know that everyone that's going to make the 53-man roster is currently in camp with the 49ers. I think they're going to scour on cut down day. I think they're going to scour and look for depth on the defensive line, both on the interior and at edge. Cause we talked about, with Jackson being out for the full season, their current edge players are Nick Bosa, Yetur Gross-Matos, Leonard Floyd, Robert Beal Jr., who again is a pass rush only edge defender, and Alex Barrett, like, again, I mean, made a play in the preseason game and has been a long tenured 49er, but not anybody that you're like, yeah, that's cool. We got him. So, it doesn't look great right now, and they've got money this year to address it if need be. I know that their preference would be to not touch that, so it rolls over, right? So that they, can do the Brock contract and all of that. I get that, but again, you got to compete this year as well. And so I wouldn't be surprised if we see some movement there to try and add, because it's not looking good right now.
Yeah. August 27th, which is next Tuesday is cut down day when the Niners got to get to 53. So you hope at that point, the Trent Williams situation is at least figured out and he's back. And I agree with what Mark said. Just kind of feels like there's a wink and a nod there. Like I'll be in when I'm in type thing. There's probably going to be a pay raise, but I would be shocked if he's not back for week 1. I really would be with Williams. And also agree with him in that Williams is a freak. I know we said it last year with Bosa too, and Bosa said he needed the time. Maybe Trent's just, I've been doing this for a really long time. I'm fine. Because Trent is kind of feel like he's a different animal. But everybody else, I don't feel that way. And it's a little bit scary. And I talked about how important this week was with he who shall not be named. I don't want to talk about the contract, but how important this week was to get the team whole again. Let's put it that way. And it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen this week.
Well, and I would
early next week.
And I appreciate what Mark said, where it was like, look, on the offensive line, not that they're not athletes, right? We're not trying. Mark's not saying that, right? But it is a bit of a different animal than, say, a Nick Bosa, who not only has to get in football shape, but again when you play defensive end, you're rushing the passer, you're defending the run, whatever. Like you said, you're going against a player trying to shed a block, and then you have to pursue, right? And that's different than, Trent Williams knows how to block, right? Knows how to pass block, knows how to run block. He knows those things. Those things aren't changing, right? It's not that, he needs reps because he's got to get used to, he's the best, probably arguably, to ever do it. So I understand where he's coming from, but I agree, it might not look pretty the first, game or two, but I'm not worried about Trent Williams. I'm more worried about Brandon Ayuk and what this offense looks like. Because again, he's been there, he's been in installs, he's been in film study, he's been in the meetings, like he's done all those things. That's great. I love it. But there's still, and I know that he has a good rapport with Brock Purdy. We've seen it already. But I still think that there's room for him to get back in football shape. And I think it might take a little bit. If you're drafting for fantasy, I wouldn't draft Brandon Ayuk. Or at least not early. I would hold off because I think the first half of the season is going to be pretty down for him. And which is partly why it's probably important for him to get this extension signed, because again, if he comes in just on that 5th year option, he might not have the season that he would like to have in order to cash in the offseason.
Dude, all these guys for fantasy, Lamb, Chase, and Ayuk. Yeah. So I have an 8th pick in one of my fantasy drafts. And I'm like, okay, I think there's 8 players. So you got McCaffrey in no particular order. McCaffrey, Bijan, Breece Hall. And then the 5 receivers are Hill, Jefferson, Lamb, St. Brown, and Chase. So I'm thinking, all right, at 8, I'm getting one of those guys to follow me, and then I'll figure it out from there. But if Lamb and Chase still aren't in camp, or they're not, then what do you do? Do you take those guys and then not have somebody maybe for 3-4 weeks? So I thought I was in like this catbird seat of like, yeah, okay, I'm at 8. I'm going to get one of these 8 guys. Now I don't know. Do I take AJ Brown? Do I take Jonathan Taylor at 8? I don't know, man, but it's weighing on my mind. I got to figure it out.
I would take Jonathan Taylor if it were me.
At 8, really?
Just over because I'm not convinced. Well, is it PPR?
Yeah.
Maybe AJ Brown over Jonathan Taylor, but I think it's close. I think it's
coming back. I like maybe Pacheco, Derrick Henry. I'm hoping for running back coming back that way, but we'll have to see. If I take a running back in the first round, then I'm not going to love my first receiver. Yeah. I don't know, man. I just want everybody to sign and get in camp. Speaking of signing, did you see this AJ Terrell deal today?
Yeah.
With the Falcons. The first thing I said, shit.
Yep.
Shit. Because the 49ers have 2 corners that they need to sign. These contracts are just absolutely out of control. Every position. Position right now. So if you didn't see this, I'm sure most of the people listening to this did. AJ Terrell is a cornerback for the Falcons. He signed a 4-year, $81 million extension that includes $65.8 million in effectively full guarantees for a corner. Now we're talking corners. Remember when Fred Warner's contract was huge at $20 million or whatever he's making right around there? Now we're talking corners there. And I was like, well, the Niners, this is why the Niners got to lock Lenore up. And a lot of people said to me, and I might have missed this, that Silver said they tried to and wanted to wait this year.
Yeah, Lenore wanted to play out.
I didn't see that.
Lenore bet on himself.
So he wants to play this year out. If he plays this year the way he did last year, I mean, again, it's going to be astronomical. And then you have Ward there too. So are the Niners going to have to decide? And these are real conversations that we need to have now. I know you're like, let's get through the season, but they take so long to make decisions and work these contracts out. Like they have to say, all right, this is the guy we want, and you just got to get this shit done. They have 26 free agents next year or whatever it is after the season. So I saw that and I'm like, oh shit, man.
It's a roster reset next year for sure.
It is, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, a lot of the stars are still going to be here. The big names will likely still be here. But they've gone the last 2 seasons with a lot of like 1- and 2-year contracts, or 2-year contracts that are really just 1-year contracts.
Yeah.
But there's going to be there's going to be a lot of players that are going to be not 49ers after the 2024 season. One of Lenore and Ward, I believe, will be gone. I think Hargrave will be gone. There's a lot. Yeah. Greenlaw's probably going to sign a deal that they can't or won't match. So, and I think in their mind, Lenore is the guy because he's younger, right? If you're locking up a cornerback, you want to lock him up for their prime. And while Charvarius Ward is still really, really good, if you sign him to a 4-year deal, you're signing him for, those last 3 years are going to be in his 30s. So that's not necessarily ideal. Whereas Lenore, I think right now is 26. I think he's the same age as Brandon Ayuk.
Again, you're paying him into his prime.
Yeah, right. So I would imagine that Lenore is the guy that they choose, just because of the youth and the fact that he's one of their guys. They drafted him, whereas they brought Ward in. Now, maybe they get creative and figure out a way to sign both, but I doubt it. But that's where guys like Renardo Green, where you see some flashes in the preseason, you go, look, if he looks the way that he does in the preseason, and by the end of this coming season, he's looking, then you're good. Then you're golden, right? Now you've got Lenore, you've got Green, you've got youth there. And, maybe you do re-sign one of the older guys like a Yadam or whatever, but to a more modest deal, or whatever the case may be. So yeah, I mean, it's the Terrell deal, hurts the 49ers because it almost certainly means that they can't sign both Ward and Lenore. And that's where I think it hurts the most.
All right, Brian, I know we got to kind of cut this short tonight. You got a big practice coming up here.
I do. The
Brian
Trash Pandas.
Legendary softball coach on the West Coast. If you don't know.
10U softball, fall ball. We are the Trash Pandas.
And that's a double A team for the Angels. You said?
Yeah, it's the Angels double A team. Yeah, I gave my kiddo 3 options. It was the Trash Pandas, the Rumble Ponies, or the Flying Squirrels, and so the Trash Pandas won out. But
I also coach softball. So used to coach baseball. Now I'm doing a little bit of softball, and the retirement is imminent for me. It's
I had 2 girls, so softball was my only choice.
It's fun, man.
I love it. I absolutely love it.
Yeah. It's a good time. All
best.
right. Well, you go try not to. What did you tell them last year? If you take a pitch, you're not only failing your team, you're failing yourself. What was that advice you gave them?
I don't know. I probably said something, and it's probably just something that being a smartass with you, and something that I'd never tell, a
those girls up there shaking like, I gotta swing.
No, my mantra for them, and I told them this, Tuesday was our first practice. I said, as arguably the greatest coach of all time, told his players, be a goldfish, right? And I think softball, baseball, that is tantamount, right? You got to have a short memory, because in a sport that is predicated essentially on failure, you can't get down on yourself too long. Otherwise it's going to get ugly quick. So I'm teaching my Trash Pandas to be a goldfish.
All right. Well, we're out of here for the week, unless Numbnuts decides to sign his contract, and then we'll come back on and do an emergency pod. But unless that happens, we'll talk to you next week. For Brian, I'm Al.
Later.
9 3 1 2 3.
.2400 Sports is an Odyssey company.